He hired me to prove his wife was cheating, slept with other women in front of our cameras, then refused to pay because she was too perfect to be real. When I confronted him years later at her charity gala, he smirked and said, "She was mine, my wife, my life, my money. You had no right." I didn't say a word. That was 3 weeks ago. Last night, he tried to crash her fundraiser with edited audio and got dragged off stage screaming while she thanked donors for saving children's lives. A guy scammed me, so I gave his wife everything. I work as a security consultant, and around 4 years back, I got pulled into this job that left me a changed man. The guy who hired us was this wealthy businessman named Marcus, who had more money than sense and wanted our team to investigate his wife. He was convinced she was having affairs behind his back and needed solid proof to protect himself in the divorce he was planning. The contract was for 8 months, and he promised to pay our firm a huge amount when we finished the job. We installed hidden cameras throughout their massive estate and tracking devices in her vehicle, all with his written permission. Our team had someone following her every single day without fail. We basically lived their lives through our monitors. You know how it goes in this business. You either stay completely neutral or get sucked into their drama like some reality show. Watching them day after day, we realized pretty quickly that his wife, Sarah, was basically an angel walking on earth. She spent her mornings teaching literacy classes at the community center and her afternoons reading to sick kids at the pediatric ward. She organized fundraisers for homeless shelters and delivered meals to elderly neighbors who couldn't leave their homes. Meanwhile, Marcus was the one we kept catching with different women at hotels, and sometimes even bringing them to the house when Sarah was at her volunteer work. The guy would meet up with multiple women in a single day, and that was just what our cameras caught. When we hit the 5-month mark, we had our standard progress meeting where we present all our findings with full documentation. We spent 7 hours going through everything, complete with video evidence and detailed reports. These showed Sarah had done absolutely nothing wrong, aside from maybe jaywalking once and forgetting to signal a lane change. After we wrapped up the presentation, Marcus just sat there looking shocked. Then he goes, "So you're telling me you found nothing on her at all? Then what am I even paying you people for?" My supervisor Ronald's expression turned to stone. With an icy calm I'd never heard from him before, he said, "You hired us to investigate your wife, and you're upset that she's completely faithful to you." Marcus got all huffy and started grabbing his stuff. Ronald then told him, "Listen, we still have 3 months left on the contract. We'll keep monitoring and give you a final report when the time's up." Marcus just waved him off and said, "Forget it, I'm done with this whole thing. Just come get your equipment when she's not around." So, about 10 days later, we did exactly what he asked. Now, the way these contracts work is you pay a deposit up front, and the balance gets paid when the contract period ends, which, in his case, was 8 months. When the contract officially ended and payday came around, our whole unit got called in for an urgent meeting about our last assignment. Turns out Marcus decided not to pay the remaining balance and basically stiffed us for all that work. We still got our regular salaries but lost out on the huge completion bonus we were counting on. Everyone was furious, so we went to grab food and started talking about how to handle this jerk. Then someone remembered we still had copies of all that footage showing him with those other women. At first, we thought about using it as leverage, but that felt too dirty, and we weren't about to stoop to his level. I kept thinking about Sarah and how she deserved to know the truth, so I reached out to her directly. I arranged to meet her at a coffee shop and laid everything out for her. I showed her the videos of Marcus with all those women, and she just broke down completely. She cried for probably 45 minutes straight, and I felt terrible for destroying her world like that. I gave her copies of everything we had collected, suggested she find a good divorce attorney, and left her my contact information. About 8 months later, I got subpoenaed because our company was taking Marcus to court for breach of contract and refusing to pay what he owed. We won easily. His lawyer tried arguing we didn't deliver the results he wanted, but our contract was to observe and report, not manufacture evidence. We finally got our money, plus damages. As I was leaving the courthouse, Sarah caught up with me and thanked me for giving her all that evidence. She told me the divorce went through, and because of everything I provided, she got the house, the cars, and a massive settlement. We randomly ran into each other again maybe 7 months after that at a bookstore downtown. We ended up talking over lunch, one thing led to another, and now we've been together for over a year. But just when I thought life was going well, Marcus showed up unannounced at Sarah's charity gala a couple weeks ago to tell us that he'd been recording all our conversations during the divorce and was planning to use them to get back at us. I stared at Marcus standing there in his expensive suit, trying to look intimidating while Sarah's guests started noticing the commotion. My first instinct was to grab him by the collar and throw him out, but Sarah touched my arm gently, keeping me grounded. She stepped forward with that same grace she always had, even when dealing with difficult situations. "Marcus, you need to leave," she said calmly, though I could see her hands trembling slightly. "This is a private event for the children's hospital." He smirked and pulled out his phone, waving it around like some kind of weapon. "Oh, I don't think so. Not until everyone here knows what kind of people you really are." He started tapping on his screen, and I moved closer to Sarah protectively. The security guard Sarah had hired for the event started approaching, but Marcus held up his hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. I've got recordings of conversations between my ex-wife and her new boyfriend here that would make very interesting listening for all these donors." Sarah's charity coordinator Margaret rushed over looking flustered. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, glancing nervously between us and the growing crowd of onlookers. "Everything's fine," Sarah said firmly, but Marcus laughed loudly enough to draw more attention. "Fine? Is that what you call stealing someone's entire life?" He turned to address the small crowd that had gathered. "This woman took everything from me in our divorce, all because her boyfriend here helped her set me up." I felt my jaw clench, but Sarah squeezed my hand. She knew me well enough to know I was about to say something I'd regret. Instead, she addressed Marcus directly. "You lost everything because you cheated repeatedly and refused to pay the people you hired. That's not a setup, that's consequences." Marcus's face turned red, and he jabbed his finger at me. "This guy worked for the company I hired. He gave her all the evidence against me. That's a conflict of interest. Probably illegal." Margaret looked confused and concerned, glancing at Sarah for guidance. More guests were stopping their conversations to watch the scene unfold. I could see Sarah's carefully planned evening starting to unravel, and I knew I had to do something. "Marcus, whatever you think you're going to accomplish here, it's not worth it," I said, keeping my voice level. "These people are here to support sick children, not not listen to your personal grievances. He ignored me and started scrolling through his phone more aggressively. Here it is, he announced triumphantly. A recording of you two discussing how you were going to use the evidence I paid for against me. Sarah's face went pale, and I remembered the conversation he must have been referring to. It was from one of our meetings with her divorce attorney, where we discussed the evidence I'd provided. Nothing illegal about it, but taken out of context, it could sound questionable. Play it then, Sarah said suddenly, surprising both Marcus and me. Go ahead, play your recording for everyone. Marcus hesitated, clearly not expecting her to call his bluff. The crowd was watching intently now, and I could see him realizing that maybe this wasn't going the way he'd planned. Margaret stepped forward again. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private event, and you're disrupting our fundraiser. I'm not going anywhere, Marcus insisted, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Not until people know the truth about what happened. Sarah took a deep breath and addressed the crowd directly. Since my ex-husband seems determined to make a scene, let me be clear about what happened. Yes, I divorced him. Yes, I received a settlement. And yes, I'm now in a relationship with someone who once worked for a company Marcus hired. But there was nothing illegal or unethical about any of it. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. You hired a security firm to investigate me because you were convinced I was cheating. When they found nothing, because there was nothing to find, you refused to pay them. You were the one having affairs. Multiple affairs. And that's why our marriage ended. The crowd was completely silent now, and I could see Marcus's plan backfiring spectacularly. Several of the donors were whispering among themselves, and none of them looked sympathetic to his cause. That's not, Marcus stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. I've spent the last 2 years rebuilding my life, focusing on helping others through this charity. And now you show up here, at an event for sick children, trying to create drama? What exactly did you hope to achieve? Marcus's phone hand dropped to his side, and he looked around at the faces staring at him, some with disgust, others with pity, but none with the support he'd apparently expected. I just wanted, he started, then stopped. You took everything from me. No, Marcus, Sarah said quietly. You lost everything because of your own choices, and now you're making another bad choice by being here. The security guards had positioned themselves nearby, ready to escort him out if necessary. Margaret was already on her phone, probably calling for additional help if needed. I watched Marcus's face cycle through various emotions: anger, frustration, embarrassment, and finally something that looked like defeat. He shoved his phone back in his pocket and straightened his tie. This isn't over, he muttered, but it sounded more like a face-saving exit line than an actual threat. As he turned to leave, Sarah called out one more time, Marcus, I hope someday you find peace with what happened, but that journey doesn't involve me or anyone here. Please don't come back. He paused at the door, and for a moment I thought he might turn around and continue his scene, but then he pushed through the doors and disappeared into the night. The crowd slowly dispersed, returning to their conversations and bidding. Margaret hurried off to smooth things over with some of the major donors, while Sarah and I found ourselves standing alone in the middle of the room. Are you okay? I asked, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, and I could feel her trembling slightly. I knew he'd show up eventually. I just hoped it wouldn't be tonight. We made our way to a quiet corner where Sarah could compose herself. The evening wasn't ruined, but it had definitely been shaken. I watched her take a few deep breaths, then square her shoulders and put her hostess smile back on. I should go check on the auction, she said, but I held her back gently. Take a minute, I suggested. Margaret can handle things for a bit. She nodded and sat down on a nearby bench. Do you think he really has recordings of us? Probably, I admitted, but nothing that would matter legally. We didn't do anything wrong, Sarah. You had every right to use that evidence in your divorce. I know, she said softly. It's just, I thought we were past all this. It's been 2 years. I sat beside her and took her hand. Some people have a hard time letting go, but he can't hurt us, not really. We haven't done anything wrong. She squeezed my hand and managed a small smile. You're right. I just hate that he tried to use this event, something meant to help children, for his petty revenge. Well, it backfired pretty spectacularly, I pointed out, which got a genuine laugh from her. It did, didn't it? She stood up, smoothing down her dress. I should get back out there. Will you check with security? Make sure they know not to let him back in? Of course, I said, standing with her. You go be the amazing hostess you are. I'll handle the security concerns. She kissed me quickly before heading back into the crowd, immediately engaging with donors and guests as if nothing had happened. I watched her for a moment, amazed as always by her resilience, then went to find the head of security. The rest of the evening proceeded smoothly, with the auction raising even more than Sarah had hoped for the children's hospital. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus wasn't done with us yet. His parting words echoed in my mind as I helped Sarah greet guests and thank donors. As the event wound down and the last guests departed, Sarah and I finally had a moment alone in the now empty ballroom. The catering staff was cleaning up, and Margaret was tallying the final donation numbers. We did it, Sarah said, exhausted but happy. Despite everything, we raised enough to fund the new pediatric wing. You did it, I corrected. This was all you. She shook her head. I couldn't have handled Marcus showing up without you there. Thank you for keeping me grounded. Always, I promised, pulling her close. Margaret approached with a huge smile. Sarah, the final numbers are in. We exceeded our goal by 30%. Sarah's face lit up, and she hugged Margaret tightly. That's incredible. The hospital will be so thrilled. As we helped with the final cleanup and said goodbye to the staff, I kept thinking about Marcus and what his next move might be. He'd been embarrassed tonight, and in my experience, embarrassed people often did stupid things. Stop worrying, Sarah said as we walked to the car. I can see it on your face. I just want to be prepared, I said. He seemed pretty determined. Then we'll handle whatever comes next, she said simply. Together, I nodded, knowing she was right. We'd faced worse than a bitter ex-husband with a grudge. But something in Marcus's eyes tonight had worried me. It wasn't just anger or hurt pride. It was something more calculated, more determined. As I drove us home, Sarah dozed in the passenger seat, exhausted from the evening's events. I couldn't help but feel protective, wanting to shield her from whatever Marcus might be planning. She'd been through enough with the divorce and rebuilding her life. She deserved peace. But peace, I was learning, wasn't always something you got to choose. Sometimes you had to fight for it, protect it, defend it against those who would try to take it away. And if Marcus thought he could disrupt our lives without consequences, he was about to learn otherwise. I just hoped it wouldn't come to that. For Sarah's sake, I hoped Marcus would realize the futility of his vendetta and move on. But something told me we hadn't seen the last of him, not by a long shot. The next morning came too quickly. Sarah had barely slept, tossing and turning beside me while I stared at the ceiling, replaying Marcus's appearance at the gala. Around 6, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple: check your email. I slipped out of bed quietly and opened my laptop in the kitchen. There it was, an email from Marcus with several audio file attachments. The subject line read, "Just the beginning." My stomach tightened as I clicked on the first file. It was a recording of Sarah and me discussing the evidence with her divorce attorney 2 years ago. Out of context, our conversation about using the surveillance footage sounded calculating. The second file was worse, a private conversation between Sarah and me where she'd expressed relief about the settlement amount. Marcus had edited it to make her sound greedy. Sarah appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong?" I turned the laptop toward her, and she listened to the recordings with growing dismay. "How did he even get these?" "He must have planted recording devices before the divorce proceedings," I said, "or had someone do it for him." She sank into a chair. "What does he want?" Before I could answer, another email arrived. This one contained a demand. Marcus wanted half of what Sarah had received in the divorce settlement, or he'd release the recordings to her charity board members, major donors, and the local media. He gave us 1 week to decide. Sarah's hands shook as she read his demands. "He can't be serious. That money is already allocated to the charity and my living expenses." I pulled her close. "We're not giving him anything. These recordings don't prove any wrongdoing. But they could damage my reputation with the charity," she said. "The board might lose confidence in me. The donors might pull their support." Over the next few days, Marcus's harassment escalated. He sent emails at all hours with new recordings, conversations taken completely out of context, private moments between Sarah and me that he'd somehow captured. Each message contained the same threat and deadline. Sarah tried to maintain normalcy, continuing her volunteer work and charity duties, but I could see the strain wearing on her. She jumped every time her phone rang, worried it might be a board member who'd received Marcus's recordings. On the 4th day, things took a darker turn. Sarah came home from the community center looking shaken. "Someone left an envelope on my car," she said, handing it to me with trembling fingers. Inside were printed screenshots of her charity's donor database with certain names highlighted. A note read, "These people will be very interested in what I have to share." "That's it," I said, reaching for my phone. "We're calling the police." Sarah grabbed my arm. "Wait, if we involve the police, it becomes public record. The media might pick it up. That's exactly what he wants, to create a scandal." She was right, but I hated feeling powerless. "Then what do we do?" "Maybe I should just pay him," she said quietly. "Give him what he wants so he'll leave us alone." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "If you pay him now, he'll just come back for more. Blackmailers always do." That evening, we met with Sarah's friend Theodore, who worked in digital security. He examined the emails and recordings carefully. "These have been edited," he confirmed. "I can tell by the audio wavelengths, but proving that to lay people would be difficult." "Can you trace where they're coming from?" I asked. Theodore shook his head. "He's using VPNs and anonymous email services. He's being careful." As we left Theodore's office, I noticed a familiar car in the parking garage. Marcus's silver Mercedes was parked 3 spaces from ours. He wanted us to know he was watching. Sarah grabbed my hand tightly. "Let's just go home." But when we arrived at Sarah's house, we found the front door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing or disturbed, but the message was clear. Marcus could get to us whenever he wanted. "I'm calling a locksmith," I said, checking every room while Sarah waited in the living room. "And we're installing a better security system. He's trying to scare us," Sarah said, her voice steadier than I expected. "Make us paranoid." She was handling this better than I was. While I wanted to confront Marcus directly, Sarah remained focused on protecting what mattered, her charity work and the people who depended on her. The next morning, Sarah had a board meeting. I offered to go with her, but she refused. "I won't let him make me look weak or scared. The charity needs to see me as capable and confident." While she was gone, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I drove to Marcus's new apartment complex and waited in the parking lot. I wasn't planning anything. I just wanted to understand his routine, maybe find some leverage of our own. After 2 hours, Marcus emerged with a woman I didn't recognize. They got into his car and drove to an upscale restaurant. I followed at a distance, watching as they had lunch on the patio. The woman looked uncomfortable, checking her phone repeatedly while Marcus talked animatedly. When they finished, I followed them back to the apartment complex. The woman got into her own car and left immediately, while Marcus went inside. I noted her license plate, thinking it might be useful later. Sarah called as I was driving home. "The board meeting went fine," she said, relief evident in her voice. "No one mentioned anything unusual. Good. Maybe he's bluffing about contacting them." "Maybe," she said, but I could hear the doubt. That night, we sat down to create a strategy. Sarah pulled out a notepad and started listing our options. "We could try to negotiate with him, offer a smaller amount to make him go away. That's still giving in to blackmail," I pointed out. "Then we need evidence of our own," she said. "Something that shows he's harassing us." I told her about following him that day, and she frowned. "Be careful. We can't stoop to his level." "I'm just gathering information," I said. The woman he was with looked uncomfortable. Maybe she's another victim of his manipulation. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. Her face paled as she read it. "It's from Margaret. She says someone sent her an anonymous email about me. She wants to meet tomorrow to discuss it." The walls were closing in. Marcus was making good on his threats, starting with the people closest to Sarah's charity work. "What are you going to tell her?" I asked. "The truth," Sarah said simply. "That my ex-husband is trying to blackmail us with edited recordings. Margaret knows me. She'll understand." But I could see the worry in her eyes. Margaret might understand. But what about the donors? The board members? How many people would Marcus have to poison against Sarah before her reputation was irreparably damaged? The next day, while Sarah met with Margaret, I returned to my surveillance of Marcus. This time, I spotted him meeting with a different person, a man in a cheap suit who looked nervous. They sat in Marcus's car for about 20 minutes. Then the man left with an envelope. I followed the man to a rundown office building where a sign read, "Private Investigator, Discreet Services." My suspicion was confirmed. Marcus had hired someone to help with his harassment campaign. When I got home, Sarah was already there, looking relieved. "Margaret was wonderful," she said. "She deleted the email without even listening to the recordings. She said she knows my character and won't let anonymous accusations change that." "That's great," I said, though I worried not everyone would be so loyal. "She also gave me some advice," Sarah continued. "She said we should document everything, every email, every encounter, every threat. Build our own evidence file." It was good advice. We spent the evening organizing everything we had. The emails, the timestamps, the photos I'd taken during my surveillance. Sarah even remembered some strange incidents from before the divorce that now made sense. Times when private conversations seemed to become public knowledge, when Marcus knew things he shouldn't have known. On day 6 of Marcus's deadline, the pressure intensified. Sarah received calls from 3 different donors asking about concerning information they'd received. She handled each call with grace, explaining the situation without going into too much detail. Two of the donors expressed support, but one seemed skeptical. "He's trying to death by 1,000 cuts," Sarah said after the last call. "Chip away at my credibility piece by piece." That afternoon, I noticed something odd. The private investigator Marcus had hired was parked outside Sarah's community center. He wasn't even trying to be subtle, sitting in his car with a camera. I approached his vehicle and knocked on the window. He rolled it down nervously. "You're not very good at this," I said calmly. "If you're going to surveil someone, at least try to blend in." He stammered something about being lost, but I cut him off. "I know Marcus hired you. What exactly did he ask you to do?" The man's eyes darted around nervously. "I can't discuss my clients." "Sure you can," I said, "especially when those clients are asking you to participate in harassment and blackmail." That got his attention. He said it was a simple surveillance job. Document her daily activities, that's all. "And the recordings he's been sending? The edited audio files?" The investigator's face went pale. "I don't know anything about recordings. He just wanted photos and activity logs." I believed him. This guy was small time, probably desperate for work. Marcus was using him as another tool in his harassment campaign. "Let me give you some free advice," I said. "Whatever he's paying you isn't worth getting involved in blackmail. Walk away now, before this gets worse." The investigator nodded quickly, started his car, and drove away. I doubted he'd be back. When I told Sarah about the encounter, she sighed. "How many more people has he involved in this?" "We'll find out tomorrow," I said. "When his deadline passes." Neither of us slept well that night. We'd made our decision. We wouldn't pay Marcus a cent, but we didn't know what the consequences would be. Would he really send the recordings to everyone? Would Sarah's charity work suffer? Would her reputation be destroyed? The deadline came and went without any immediate action from Marcus. No emails, no calls, nothing. The silence was almost worse than his threats. Then, around noon, Sarah's phone started ringing. Board members, donors, even some of the families whose children benefited from her charity. They were all calling about emails they'd received. Sarah handled each call with remarkable composure, explaining the situation honestly but carefully. Most people were supportive, expressing outrage that someone would try to damage her charity work. But a few were clearly uncomfortable, and one major donor said he needed time to reassess his involvement. By evening, Sarah was exhausted. "Maybe I should step down from the charity," she said quietly. "Let someone else take over without all this baggage." "Don't you dare," I said firmly. "That's exactly what he wants. You've built something amazing, and you're not letting him destroy it." She nodded, but I could see the doubt creeping in. Marcus was winning, not through the truth but through the exhaustion of constant attacks. That night, we received an unexpected visitor. The woman I'd seen with Marcus at the restaurant stood at our door, looking nervous but determined. "My name is Greta," she said. "I dated Marcus briefly. I think I have information that might help you." We invited her in, and she told us her story. She'd met Marcus 6 months ago through a dating app. At first, he'd been charming, but he quickly became controlling and manipulative. When she tried to end things, he'd threatened to share intimate photos she'd sent him. "I paid him to delete them," she said, ashamed, "but I don't think he ever did. He mentioned he was good at keeping records of everything." Sarah and I exchanged glances. If Marcus had a pattern of this behavior, we might be able to establish a harassment case. "Would you be willing to document your experience?" Sarah asked gently. "We're building a file of our own." Greta nodded. "I should have done something sooner. When I saw him at lunch the other day bragging about his plan to get money from his ex-wife, I knew I had to speak up. She gave us dates, text messages, and even bank records showing the payment she'd made to Marcus. It was exactly the kind of evidence we needed to show his pattern of behavior." After Greta left, Sarah seemed energized. "We're not the only ones he's done this to. There might be others. We need to be careful," I warned. "If we start reaching out to his other victims, he might escalate." But Sarah was already making plans. "Tomorrow, I'm going to call a meeting with the full charity board. I'll lay everything out. His harassment, the blackmail attempts, all of it. If they want me to step down after that, I will. But I won't slink away in shame over his lies." I admired her courage. While I'd been focused on defending against Marcus's attacks, she was ready to go on the offensive with the truth. The next morning brought another surprise. Theodore called with news. He'd been analyzing the email patterns and found something interesting. The timing of his emails corresponds with someone accessing public Wi-Fi at a coffee shop near his apartment. If we can prove he was there at those exact times, we can link him directly to the harassment. It wasn't conclusive evidence, but it was another piece of the puzzle. We were slowly building a case that showed Marcus as the aggressor, not the victim he pretended to be. Sarah's board meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. I drove her there, offering silent support as she prepared to face the people whose opinion mattered most to her charity work. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you," I said as she got out of the car. She smiled, looking more confident than she had in days. "We're going to get through this. He's not going to win." While Sarah was in her meeting, I decided to pay Marcus a visit, not to confront him physically, but to let him know we weren't backing down. I found him at the coffee shop Theodore had identified, typing on his laptop. He looked up as I approached, his expression shifting from surprise to smugness. "Come to negotiate?" he asked. "Come to give you one chance to stop this," I said, sitting across from him. "We have evidence of your harassment. We have testimony from Greta. We know about the private investigator. End this now, or we'll be forced to take legal action." Marcus laughed. "Legal action? Based on what?" "I'm just sharing truthful recordings with concerned citizens." "Edited recordings," I corrected. "Obtained through illegal surveillance, combined with a clear pattern of blackmail and harassment." His smile faltered slightly. "You can't prove any of that." "We can prove enough," I said. "And unlike you, we don't need to destroy anyone. We just need to show the truth about who you really are." I stood to leave, but Marcus grabbed my wrist. "She took everything from me. My money, my reputation, my life. I'm just returning the favor." I pulled my hand away. "She took what the court awarded her because of your infidelity. Your reputation was ruined by your own actions. And your life? You're the one wasting it on revenge instead of moving forward." As I walked away, I heard him call out, "This isn't over." I didn't respond. He was right. It wasn't over. But for the first time since this started, I felt like we had the upper hand. When I picked Sarah up from her board meeting, she was glowing. "They gave me a standing ovation," she said, tears in her eyes. "Every single board member expressed support. They even want to help with legal action if necessary." "That's amazing," I said, pulling her into a hug. "One of the board members is a retired judge," she continued. "He said what Marcus is doing clearly constitutes harassment and possibly extortion. He offered to help us file the appropriate complaints." The tide was turning. Marcus had overplayed his hand, assuming that shame and fear would make us crumble. Instead, his attacks had rallied support around Sarah. That evening, we met with the retired judge, who helped us organize our evidence into a coherent legal complaint. With Greta's testimony, the documentation of Marcus's threats, and the pattern of harassment we'd established, we had a strong case. The key key is showing intent, the judge explained. His demands for money in exchange for silence clearly crossed the line from personal vendetta to criminal behavior. As we prepared to take legal action, I couldn't help but reflect on how this had all started. Marcus had hired us to find dirt on Sarah, convinced she was betraying him. When we found nothing, he'd refused to accept it. Now, years later, he was still refusing to accept responsibility for his own actions. But Sarah had something Marcus didn't: integrity, genuine relationships, and the strength to face adversity with grace. His attempts to tear her down had only revealed the depth of support she'd built through years of selfless service. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal preparations. We filed formal complaints, submitted our evidence, and began the process of protecting Sarah from further harassment. Marcus must have sensed the shift, because his emails stopped abruptly. Then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, we received word that made everything worthwhile. The police had arrested Marcus on charges of harassment and attempted extortion. Apparently, Greta wasn't his only victim who'd come forward. 2 other women had filed similar complaints, establishing a clear pattern of behavior. Sarah cried when she heard the news, not tears of sadness, but of relief. "It's really over," she whispered. "It's over," I confirmed, holding her close. The aftermath was swift. Marcus's arrest made local news, but not in the way he'd intended. Instead of Sarah being portrayed as a gold digger who'd stolen from her ex-husband, the story focused on Marcus as a serial harasser who'd targeted multiple women. Sarah's charity saw an unexpected surge in donations from people who admired her strength in facing down a blackmailer. The donor who'd been reconsidering his support not only maintained his pledge, but increased it, impressed by Sarah's integrity. As for Marcus, he eventually pled guilty to reduced charges to avoid a trial. He received probation and a restraining order keeping him away from Sarah and the other victims. His reputation, which he'd been so desperate to protect by destroying Sarah's, was ruined by his own actions. Standing in Sarah's office at the charity a month later, watching her coordinate the groundbreaking ceremony for the new pediatric wing, I marveled at her resilience. She'd faced down a campaign of harassment and emerged stronger, with her integrity intact and her mission unchanged. "You know what the ironic part is?" Sarah said during a quiet moment. "If Marcus had just moved on after the divorce, he could have rebuilt his life by now. Instead, he wasted 2 years plotting revenge that only destroyed himself." She was right. While Marcus had been consumed by bitterness and schemes, Sarah had built something meaningful. She turned her pain from the divorce into purpose, helping others while Marcus stewed in his resentment. The security firm I worked for had even benefited from the situation. After word spread about how we'd handled the original investigation with integrity, refusing to manufacture evidence despite losing payment, we'd received several new contracts from clients who valued honesty. As I watched Sarah address the crowd at the groundbreaking ceremony, thanking donors and sharing her vision for how the new wing would help sick children, I thought about how different things could have been. If Marcus had accepted the truth about his marriage, if he'd paid what he owed, if he'd chosen growth over revenge, none of this would have happened. But then Sarah and I might never have found each other. The charity might not have received the surge of support that would help so many children. Sometimes, I realized, good things can emerge from difficult circumstances if you face them with integrity and courage. Marcus had tried to destroy Sarah with lies and manipulation, but truth, supported by genuine relationships and unwavering character, had prevailed. It wasn't always easy to take the high road, to resist sinking to his level, to maintain dignity in the face of attacks. But Sarah had shown me that integrity isn't just about being right. It's about being strong enough to stand for what's right even when it's difficult. As the ceremony concluded, and Sarah made her way back to me through the crowd of well-wishers, I saw Marcus's silver Mercedes drive slowly past the construction site. For a moment, my body tensed, ready for another confrontation. But the car didn't stop. It simply continued on, disappearing into traffic. Sarah noticed it too, but didn't react beyond a slight pause in her step. Then she continued forward, greeting donors and volunteers, focused on the future rather than the past. Marcus might still be out there, nursing his grievances and plotting his next move, but he no longer had power over us. We'd learned valuable lessons about documentation, about the importance of building strong relationships, about facing challenges head-on rather than hoping they'll go away. Most importantly, we'd learned that integrity isn't just a personal virtue. It's a shield against those who would try to tear you down. The new pediatric wing would help thousands of children over the coming years. Sarah's charity would continue growing, supported by people who'd seen her character tested and proven. And somewhere out there, other women who'd been victims of Marcus's manipulation had found the courage to speak up, preventing him from hurting anyone else. As we drove home that evening, Sarah reached over and took my hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for standing by me, for believing in me, for helping me fight back the right way." "Always," I replied, meaning it more than ever. The sun was setting as we pulled into the driveway, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It felt like a new beginning, free from the shadow of Marcus's vendetta. We'd won not by sinking to his level, but by rising above it, and that victory was sweeter than any revenge could have been. The morning after the groundbreaking ceremony, I woke up to find Sarah already dressed and pacing the kitchen. She had that determined look that meant she'd been thinking about something all night. "Marcus drove by yesterday," she said without preamble. During the ceremony, I nodded, pouring coffee. "I saw him too. The restraining order means he shouldn't have been within 500 feet of me." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the detective who handled our case." Within an hour, Detective Morrison was sitting in our living room, reviewing the security footage from the construction site. The cameras had caught Marcus's Mercedes making 3 slow passes during the ceremony. "This is definitely a violation," Morrison confirmed. "We'll pick him up today." But when officers went to Marcus's apartment, he was gone. His landlord said he'd packed up and left in the middle of the night. The Mercedes was found abandoned at a rental car agency near the airport. Sarah's hands shook as Morrison explained. "He could be anywhere by now." "We'll put out alerts," Morrison assured us. "In the meantime, I'd recommend increasing your security measures." That afternoon, I installed new cameras around Sarah's house while she met with the charity's security consultant. We weren't going to live in fear, but we weren't going to be careless either. 3 days passed without any sign of Marcus. Sarah threw herself into work, finalizing plans for the pediatric wing construction. I went back to my regular security consulting jobs, though I found myself constantly checking my phone for updates. Then Greta called. Her voice was panicked. "He contacted me. Marcus, he knows I talked to you. We met her at a public cafe downtown." She showed us the email, Marcus writing from a new address, accusing her of betrayal and threatening to release the photos he still had. "He said I ruined his life by testifying against him," Greta said, tears streaming down her face. Sarah reached across the table and took her hand. "You did nothing wrong. He ruined his own life." We went straight to Detective Morrison with the new evidence. The email had been sent from an IP address in a neighboring state, confirming Marcus had fled the jurisdiction. This escalates things, Morrison said. Crossing state lines while violating a restraining order and continuing harassment makes this a federal matter. Within days, the FBI was involved. Agent Chen, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, took over the case. She interviewed all of Marcus's victims, building a comprehensive profile of his behavior. He's escalating because he feels cornered, Chen explained during one of our meetings. Men like him can't handle losing control. Sarah's charity work continued despite the stress. The construction had begun on the pediatric wing, and she refused to let Marcus's actions overshadow the positive impact it would have. But I could see the strain in the way she constantly checked over her shoulder, the way she startled at unexpected noises. 2 weeks after Marcus disappeared, strange things started happening. Sarah's charity received several large anonymous donations, each exactly $1 more than donations she'd received the previous year. The memo lines contained cryptic messages, "For the children who deserve better," and "Some people know the truth." Theodore analyzed the transactions and discovered they'd been made using prepaid cards purchased with cash. Untraceable, but clearly meant to send a message. "He's playing games," I said, watching Sarah read through the donation records. "Let him," she replied. "The money still helps sick children, regardless of his twisted motivations." But the games escalated. Flowers started arriving at the charity office addressed to Sarah, beautiful arrangements with cards that said things like, "Thinking of you always," and "You can't hide from destiny." The florist had been paid in cash by a man matching Marcus's description, but security footage was always conveniently corrupted or missing. Agent Chen increased surveillance on locations Marcus might target. His credit cards and bank accounts were frozen, but he'd clearly prepared for this possibility with cash reserves. One evening, as Sarah and I were having dinner at home, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her parents' number, but when she answered, there was only breathing on the other end. "Marcus?" she said, her voice steady despite her white knuckles gripping the phone. The breathing continued for a moment, then the line went dead. When we called her parents back, they said they hadn't called. Their phone records showed no outgoing calls to Sarah's number. "He's spoofing numbers now," Theodore explained when we consulted him, using technology to make it appear calls are coming from trusted contacts. The psychological warfare was taking its toll. Sarah started having nightmares, waking up gasping and disoriented. I suggested she talk to someone, but she refused. "I won't let him make me a victim," she said. "That's what he wants." 3 weeks into the manhunt, we got a break. One of Marcus's former business associates contacted the FBI. Marcus had reached out trying to liquidate some investments, desperate for more cash. The associate, aware of the charges against Marcus, had agreed to meet while wearing a wire. The meeting was set for a truck stop 2 states away. FBI agents positioned themselves throughout the location, ready to make the arrest. Sarah and I waited anxiously at home, phones in hand for updates, but Marcus never showed. Instead, the associate received a text saying Marcus had smelled a trap. Somehow, he'd figured out the setup. "He's getting help," Agent Chen concluded. "Someone's feeding him information." The investigation turned inward, looking for leaks. Meanwhile, the harassment continued. Sarah's elderly neighbors started receiving calls claiming to be from her charity, asking for donations in increasingly aggressive ways. Several complained, and Sarah had to spend hours doing damage control. "He's trying to destroy everything I've built," she said after a particularly difficult conversation with a longtime supporter. "No," I corrected. "He's trying to make you destroy it yourself by giving up. Don't let him win." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The private investigator I'd confronted weeks earlier reached out. He'd been following the news and had information he thought might help. "Marcus had me research more than just Sarah," he admitted when we met. "He wanted information on safe houses, fake ID sources, untraceable communication methods. I thought it was just paranoia at the time. He provided Agent Chen with everything he had: names, addresses, contact information for people who operated in the shadows. It was a roadmap to Marcus's potential hiding spots. The FBI raids began immediately. They hit 6 locations in 3 states, following the paper trail of Marcus's preparations. At the 4th location, a rundown motel using fake names for cash-paying guests, they found evidence Marcus had been there recently. Fast food wrappers from that morning, a burner phone with Sarah's number saved, and maps with various locations circled. "He's mobile but getting sloppy," Chen reported. "We're closing in." Sarah's charity gala for the pediatric wing was scheduled for the following week. We debated canceling, but Sarah refused. "These kids need this facility," she argued. "I won't let him take that away from them too." Security for the event was tripled. FBI agents would be present, both visible and undercover. Every guest would be screened, every entrance monitored. It seemed excessive, but nobody was taking chances. 3 days before the gala, I was reviewing security plans when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but something made me answer. "You think you've won." Marcus's voice was rough, tired. "But you don't understand what you've taken from me." I immediately started recording, gesturing frantically for Sarah to call Agent Chen on another line. "You took everything from yourself, Marcus," I said, trying to keep him talking. "Your choices, your consequences." "She was mine," he snarled. "My wife, my life, my money. You had no right to interfere." "She was never yours," I replied. "People aren't possessions." "I'll be at the gala," he said suddenly. "You can't stop me. I deserve to see what my money built." "Marcus, turn yourself in," I urged. "This has gone far enough." His laugh was bitter. "Too far? I haven't even started. You think those flowers and calls were bad? Wait until you see what I have planned for her special night." The line went dead. Agent Chen arrived within minutes, tech specialists analyzing the recording. They traced the call to a payphone at a rest stop, but by the time local police arrived, Marcus was gone. "He's unraveling," Chen observed, making threats on recorded lines, announcing his intentions. He's either given up on avoiding capture, or he's planning something he doesn't expect to survive. The gala preparations took on a grim urgency. Metal detectors were installed at every entrance. Guest lists were reviewed and re-reviewed. Sarah worked with Margaret to contact every attendee personally, explaining the enhanced security without causing panic. "Maybe we should cancel," Margaret suggested gently. "People would understand." Sarah's jaw set stubbornly. "We've worked too hard, and those kids need this wing. We're not canceling because of him." The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. Sarah dozed fitfully beside me while I stared at the ceiling, running through security protocols in my mind. Every possible entrance, every potential threat, every contingency plan. At 3 a.m., Sarah's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "See you tomorrow, my love. Wear the blue dress. You know it was always my favorite." The message made my skin crawl. Sarah deleted it without responding, but I could see her hands shaking. "He won't get near you," I promised. "I know," she said, but neither of us really believed it. Marcus had proven too resourceful, too determined. Somehow, some way, he would try to make good on his threat. The morning of the gala dawned gray and drizzly. Sarah spent the day at the venue with Margaret, overseeing final preparations. I stayed with the security team, walking through every procedure one more time. Agent Chen pulled me aside. "We've got agents at every entrance, plainclothes officers throughout the crowd, and spotters on the surrounding buildings. If he shows up, we'll get him." But I couldn't shake the feeling we were missing something. Marcus had spent weeks planning this. He wouldn't just walk through the front door. As guests began arriving, the security checkpoint process was smooth but thorough. Everyone understood the circumstances and cooperated without complaint. The metal detectors caught a few forgotten pocket knives, and one guest's concealed carry permit holder agreed to leave their weapon in their car. Sarah looked stunning in a black gown, deliberately not the blue dress Marcus had mentioned. She greeted guests with her usual warmth, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes scanned each new arrival. The cocktail hour proceeded without incident. Donors mingled, bidding on silent auction items and discussing the impact the new wing would have. Several pediatric patients and their families were special guests, their excitement infectious. I was starting to think Marcus had been bluffing when one of the catering staff approached me. "Sir, we found something strange in the kitchen." My blood ran cold. The kitchen, we'd screened the catering company but hadn't maintained constant surveillance on their prep area. I followed the server quickly, alerting Chen through my earpiece. In the kitchen, the head chef showed me a box that had been discovered in their supply delivery. Inside was a bottle of champagne with a note: "For the toast to Sarah's success, M." Chen's team descended on the kitchen immediately. The champagne was taken for testing while every other bottle was inspected. The catering staff was re-interviewed, delivery records scrutinized. "He's not here," Chen concluded. "This was placed earlier, probably through a third party. He's trying to disrupt the event without showing up," but I wasn't convinced. This felt too simple for someone who'd spent weeks planning. I returned to the main event space, scanning the crowd more carefully. That's when I noticed him. Not Marcus, but a man I recognized from the security footage at Marcus's apartment complex. One of his drinking buddies. Someone who hadn't been on our radar as a threat. He was dressed as a server, moving through the crowd with a tray of champagne glasses. I moved to intercept him, speaking quietly into my earpiece to avoid causing a scene. But as I approached, he saw me coming. His eyes widened in recognition, and he dropped the tray, glasses shattering on the floor as he bolted for the service exit. Security converged from all directions. The man was tackled before he could reach the door, guests gasping and stepping back from the commotion. As officers cuffed him, he started laughing. "You're too late," he said. "He's already inside." My heart stopped. I spun around, searching for Sarah in the crowd. She was near the stage, preparing to give her speech about the new wing. Everything looked normal, but something felt wrong. Then I saw it, a figure in a server's uniform moving purposefully toward the stage, keeping his face turned away from the security cameras. The walk was familiar, even with the attempted disguise. "Marcus at 2 o'clock approaching the stage," I said into my earpiece, already moving. But Marcus had seen the commotion with his accomplice. He abandoned stealth, breaking into a run toward Sarah. She turned at the sound of running feet, her eyes widening in recognition and fear. Time seemed to slow as multiple security agents converged. Marcus reached into his jacket, and everyone tensed, hands moving to weapons. But instead of a GN, he pulled out a handful of papers, photos, documents, something he clearly wanted to show to the crowd. "You need to know the truth," he shouted, trying to push past the security closing in. "She's not who you think she is." He made it within 10 feet of Sarah before 3 agents brought him down. The papers scattered across the floor. They appeared to be the edited photos and doctored financial records he'd threatened to release, his last desperate attempt to destroy her reputation. As they cuffed him, Marcus's eyes found Sarah. The hatred there was mixed with something else. Desperation. Maybe even grief for the life he'd destroyed with his own choices. "This isn't over," he said as they dragged him away. "You can't hide from what you did to me." Sarah stood frozen for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. She stepped to the microphone, looking out at the shocked crowd. "I apologize for the disruption," she said, her voice steady. "As some of you know, my ex-husband has been harassing me for months. Tonight, he tried to ruin this celebration of hope and healing for sick children, but he failed, because what we're doing here is bigger than one person's vendetta." The crowd began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a standing ovation. Sarah continued her speech about the pediatric wing, about the children it would help, about the power of community coming together for good. I watched from the side, my heart still racing from the confrontation. Agent Chen appeared beside me. "He'll be going away for a long time," she said. "Multiple federal charges, plus the state charges. He won't be bothering anyone again." The rest of the gala proceeded smoothly. Donors opened their wallets even wider, moved by Sarah's grace under pressure. The auction exceeded all expectations, fully funding not just the wing but additional equipment and programs. As the evening wound down, Sarah found me in the crowd. She looked exhausted but triumphant. "It's really over now," she said, and this time we both believed it. Marcus was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. His accomplice got 2 years for his part in the plan. The other women Marcus had victimized found closure in his conviction, some even starting a support group for harassment survivors. Sarah's charity thrived in the aftermath. The story of her courage in the face of stalking and intimidation inspired even more support. The pediatric wing opened 6 months later, treating its first young patients with state-of-the-art equipment and compassionate care. We married the following spring in a small ceremony at the community center, where Sarah taught literacy classes. Ronald attended, joking that this was the most unusual outcome of any surveillance job he'd supervised. Margaret was Sarah's maid of honor, and even the retired judge who'd helped us build our case attended. Life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah continued her charity work while I grew my security consulting practice, specializing in helping stalking victims protect themselves. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, with good security systems, but also friendly neighbors who looked out for each other. Sometimes I still check the locks twice before bed. Sarah occasionally startles at unexpected noises. The experience left its marks on both of us, but we faced it together, with integrity and courage, and came out stronger on the other side. The pediatric wing has treated over 1,000 children in its first year. Every time Sarah visits, reading to the young patients just like she used to as a volunteer, I'm reminded that good really can triumph over evil, not through revenge or sinking to their level, but through persistence, truth, and the support of people who recognize genuine character. Marcus sends letters sometimes from prison. We don't read them anymore. They go straight to our lawyer, then to a file in case they're ever needed as evidence. He's become a cautionary tale in our lives, a reminder of how bitterness and entitlement can destroy someone from the inside out. But mostly, we don't think about him at all. We're too busy living the life he tried to destroy, one filled filled with purpose, love, and the knowledge that we stood up to a bully and won, not by becoming like him, but by being exactly who we always were.